Hi, this is John Kelv. I'm in the Master's Program in Information Assurance. This semester I'm going to be discussing this book, The Art of Software Security Assessment. And I was interested in understanding vulnerabilities in software better. So that's the reason I chose the book. There's 3 sections in the book, and the middle section, the software vulnerabilities, is quite massive. It's close to 700 pages. And lastly, there's a lot of software vulnerabilities in practice, covers a lot of network protocols, firewalls, a lot of different network devices, etc. So we're going to start off with software vulnerabilities, and this week we're going to discuss the fundamentals and also design review. And then next week we'll cover operational review and application review. So one of the things I'm not going to cover is CIA and security policy and those sorts of things, what a bug is, software bug is. You already know that better than I, or at least as well as me. So I don't want to waste anybody's time. So there's a lot of different ways you can do software auditing. The book is actually mainly about manual code audits. So they wrote this in 2007, and the reason for doing that, they felt that there weren't enough professionals who knew how to do this auditing, so that's the reason for the book. So one of the first decisions you need to make is where in the software development process do you want to do your code auditing. And so this looks familiar. You have design requirements that go into your design, implementation, and operation and maintenance. This book is actually, this chapter and the first 4 chapters really are trying to give the reader a framework for looking at vulnerabilities and discussing them and identifying them more precisely. So the author makes this distinction, one of the first distinctions he makes in design, implementation, and operational. And the operational, it actually includes maintenance as well as configuration. In the maintenance area, he includes software engineering and theft. And of course the design is very high level, and the implementation is very low level, sort of business logic in an application. So one of the examples the author put in here, talking about the differences between design, implementation, and operational, was Telnet. And I was actually kind of surprised by this, because Telnet, when it was originally designed, didn't have to worry about vulnerabilities with TCP/IP and all sorts of other things. So at any rate, he considers this a design vulnerability, and so a lot of the vulnerabilities relate to not having communication encrypted between the two links. Some of the common threads, we'll be discussing trust relationships again and again. They're involved in a huge number of vulnerabilities. Input and data flow also is very, very important. And lastly, the interfaces, how they're exposed and to what extent they're exposed to from one module to another and within a module. So in design review, he discusses enforcing security policy. Again, I'm not going to go into CIA and discussing that because you're all familiar with that. And I don't want to waste anybody's time. The other thing that I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on, I think Roy is actually doing, one of the books he's covering is in threat modeling, etc. And so I'm going to let him kind of fill that in. But suffice it to say here that when you're looking at vulnerabilities, you need to know what your threat environment is. And so you need to assess your vulnerabilities in light of that. And also in terms of prioritizing which ones you should be working on first, that sort of the threat environment also, or the threat modeling also helps in that situation. So the problem domain logic, you could think about it as, I know some people work in banking out at DSU, so you could think about it as different processes in a bank, different business processes. You know, a checking account has to check the balance before it honors a check, and you know, there's a lot of logical steps there. Decomposition, so it could be either top-down progression or bottom-up. And I'll talk a little bit more about decomposition with respect to data flow diagrams. And trust boundaries are also extremely important in understanding and identifying vulnerabilities. So the 4 principles the author discusses in the book is accuracy. And so he's discussing how you take requirements and how that goes into a design. The clarity is decomposing, and again, this could be data flow diagrams, and you need to decompose very complex processes into simple processes with trust boundaries, and etc., so that you can actually analyze what's going on. Loose coupling is really the goal here, through well-defined APIs rather than complex interdependencies. And strong cohesion, this is intra, that means within one module. Loose coupling is inter-module between 2 different modules. So one of the examples given is the messaging. Windows uses messaging in managing GUIs. So in this situation, well, let me start over again. The WM timer, this is when a timer has expired, and so this message is being sent from attacker to another process here. So if the code here is manipulated in the messaging here, it can be manipulated into a way that there's a function pointer, and the function pointer points back to the exploit code that was created by the attacker, and the execution would start, be pointing at this right here. And one of the problems with strong coupling is this high degree of trust. So this is being sent and there's no authentication that the message is authentic. There's no trust boundary between these two. It's sort of just a shared trust between the two. And this is called a Windows shatter vulnerability. And lastly, this was one that was found in Solaris, and it's RPC. So the auto mount, this is for mounting and demounting the kernel, doing that for the kernel, and it's pretty protected. It only is available only through 3 protected loopback transports. This status reports on changes in states, and more specifically on servers that have gone down or are out of service. So when that happens, this process would send out a message. Now normally that's going to send out a message when servers go down, but this time an attacker is going to have it send a message to auto mount. And since this runs as a root, this is going to be sent over here, and auto mount is going to treat it as a trusted message, and it's going to run as a root. And again, when the attacker has control over what is done here, then he can control the code that goes into that, and the API allows different messaging as well. So it comes from the root on a protected loopback, and that is the end. We only have 10 minutes. So anyways, thanks very much for listening, and any comments, complaints, questions, whatever, please feel free to put those in the discussion board. Thanks very much.